Haiti authorities reported up until now over 300 missing persons during the search and rescue operations. Tropical storm Grace hit the Yucatan Peninsula while storm Henri is approaching to southern Bermudas. In Afghanistan, the Transitional Council and leaders of the Taliban discussed a security plan in the country as the arrangement of the government structure is underway. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. Now we begin with the news. The humanitarian crisis in Haiti worsens. Authorities reported up until now over 300 missing persons during the search and rescue operations. The latest preliminary report of the Civil Protectorate show a number of 332 people. The injuries count rose to 12,268 as a result of the tremors. The Southern Department, one of the most damaged by the earthquake, registers a total of 1,832 deaths so far, being the city of Las Cayes with the most cases of an amount of 2,189 fatal victims. Of the meantime, the residents in the most affected areas assured that the cries of help persist among citizens who are still buried under the rubble. In Haiti also, but in another matter, Colombian ex-militaries acknowledged their responsibilities in the murder of President Jovenel Moïse. A Colombian television channel disclosed that it had access to the statements of the gunmen involved in Moïse's killings. In a 15-hour span of audio, 4 of the suspects told their account of the events of July 7th, and also the hours that followed the magnicide. According to the stories obtained by the TV channel, Joseph Ferrer Badillo, ex-member of Haiti's Justice Ministry, is who gave the order of operation that resulted in Moïse's killings to retired Army Captain Germán Riviera Garcia. The magnicide was effected by a command of 26 mercenaries who interrupted at the presidential palace and the house without resistance from the country's security services that ordered the mandatory. On Thursday, Colombia's prosecutor's office disclosed new evidence in a corruption and drug dealing case dubbed the Narcoavioneta of the narco aircraft that involves police officers of Providencia region. The video, taken from a security camera at the Guaymaral airport hangar, shows the moment in which an aircraft is loaded with 400 kilograms of cocaine, using supposed humanitarian aid and health masks as a facade on the early morning of May 23rd. The light aircraft was seized shortly after on Providencia Island. The prosecutor's office is prosecuting 3 men, the pilot and the co-pilot of the aircraft, plus a police captain who allegedly called his colleagues at the El Embrujo airport in Providencia to allow the cargo to pass through. All of the people prosecuted in this case pledged not guilty. However, given the new evidence, they are seeking a legal agreement. Because of these events, opposition legislators point the government of Iván Duque as indirect responsible and have questioned the role of the anti-narcotics police in this episode. In Guatemala, Mauro Berceleri, director of the Migrants' House, pointed out that the government reproduces the pattern of infringing the migrants' human rights, the same one used by the United States, having that country's administration implemented the express deportations policy.
I think the United States are dumping on Mexico, and Mexico is dumping on Guatemala, and Guatemala is reproducing the same system and leaving it in the other borders. It's a practice that shouldn't be in the context of a pandemic, that violates human rights and the people's right to migrate as such.
The director of Guatemala's Migrants' House requested the government to make and ensure the conditions needed so that the people who have suffered deportation do not have to retake the migrant path.
We demand that the state of Guatemala see to creating the conditions needed so that the people affected by the express deportations receive care and protection under the frame of humanitarian law. and so this would guarantee them not having to migrate again in the search for better living opportunities. Finally, we demand that the involved states, all from Canada to Dominican Republic, those in North and Central America, that they honor the obligations stipulated in their signed multilateral agreements in the points that tend to migration, asylum and refuge.
Cuba produces antibodies that neutralize all the variants of COVID-19. This was assured in the recent meeting among experts and scientists who battle against the pandemic. In the latest gathering between authorities and social sectors involved in the battle against COVID-19, specialists guaranteed that the results of the neutralization study of the Abdala and Soberano 2 serums show these immunogens as effective neutralizing agents against all COVID-19 derivatives, including the Delta variant. The vaccines have proved efficacy against all the variants of the virus, and with them respecting the three basic rules, which are social distancing, the use of masks, and hygiene awareness, we will control the COVID-19 pandemic, affirmed Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel on Twitter. Also, in the meeting, it was disclosed that another million people will be vaccinated next week, and 22 other municipalities are set to begin immunization. The doses for these efforts will be distributed in the country in the next hours. Last week, 20 million doses of Abdala anti-COVID-19 vaccines were produced and are now ready for distribution. Paralympic officials in Tokyo on Thursday reported the first confirmed coronavirus case in the Olympic Village, 5 days before the Games are set to be open. The Olympic Village case is one of 16 total associated with the Paralympics so far. The early Paralympic cases came as both Japan and Tokyo are reporting record daily new cases. On Tuesday, the Japanese government extended the state of emergency in Tokyo and other regions until September 12, a week after the end of the Paralympic Games. During the Olympic Games, organizers recorded more than 500 cases within the Olympic bubble. Seiko Hashimoto, president of the Tokyo Organizing Committee, said that organizers were implementing tight measures to avoid large outbreaks. We'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Tropical Storm Grace hit the Yucatan Peninsula, while Storm Henri is approaching to southern Bermudas. Tropical Storm Grace left Dominican Republic and Haiti with landslides and floodings, and also hit Mexican ground just over Cancun. Its trajectory for now is oriented towards the west, predicted to pass through Toluca and Jalisco, with its impact spread along the Yucatan Peninsula, all of which is officially under orange alert. The government has issued warnings to the population, reminding them to take shelter and evacuate vulnerable areas. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, Tropical Storm Henri's course is no longer a danger to Bermuda, as the phenomenon backs away from the island, with some forecasts predicting its growth into a hurricane. Delegations from countries with emerging economies clustered as the BRICS formation agreed to strengthen cooperation in order to face the structural challenges regarding climate change. In a virtual conference, the heads of special agencies from Russia, China, India, Brazil, and South Africa signed an agreement that will allow a head-on approach towards the challenges that represent the large-scale natural disasters of the present day. The delegations expect to consolidate technological exchange and data processing with a real-time monitoring plan. The covenant will allow the study of climate change for better environmental protection and the managing of the consequences of natural or technological disasters. And on the fifth day of an intense fight against against fires that have killed 2 people and destroyed thousands of hectares of forest on the French Riviera, planes and waterbombing helicopters tried to contain the blaze. The blazes are spreading through the southeastern Riviera haven of Saint-Tropez in the Var department. The scorching has ravaged 5,000 hectares of forests and vineyards, resulting in the destruction of the wildlife that inhabited the lands. 1,200 firefighters were deployed with high-pressure hoses, waterbombing planes and helicopters, yet the flames are still active. This is the latest addition to the wildfires threatening the Mediterranean region, all through Turkey, Greece, Italy, Spain, and Algeria. On Thursday, the U.S. Capitol Police alerted of a possible explosives attack on the area and also ordered evacuation of its facilities. U.S. media reported that a man in a pickup truck made the bomb threat, and the law enforcement and the FBI have dispatched negotiators to try to engage the suspects. The Library of Congress main building has been evacuated, as well as the Senate office building, according to the reports. The nearby Republican National Committee headquarters was also reportedly evacuated. Both the Senate and the House of Representatives are currently on recess, but staffers are working in the Capitol complex. Tensions have remained high on Capitol Hill more than 7 months after the deadly January 6 insurrection, when supporters of then-President Donald Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol, fought with police, and sought to block certification of the presidential election. Also, in April, a man rammed a car into barriers at the U.S. Capitol, killing 1 Capitol police officer before the attacker was shot and killed. Public sector workers and civil servants in Brazil begin a 24-hour general strike in rejection of the administrative reform pushed by Bolsonaro's government. Protesters said the proposed amendment to the constitution undermines the rule of law and threatens labor rights. They denounced that its approval is a climax point in the privatization agenda advanced by the administration of Jair Bolsonaro. Civil organizations insist this measure destroys the public service and worsens the working conditions of doctors, teachers, and nurses, thus affecting and future employees, and also especially the low-income population. Public workers have announced the strike will be extended as part of the struggle against a new attempt to eliminate neoliberalism. A subsidiary of French wine group Castel paid rebels in the Central African Republic to protect its sugar operations in the country. The local subsidiary of Castel, called Sucaf RCA, entered into a security arrangement with an armed group called the Union for Peace in Central Africa to protect a sugar refinery and cane fields. The agreement was forged in late 2014 at a time of political and security upheaval and lasted until March this year. The rebels have been accused by right groups of committing atrocities in the chronically unstable country. The Union for Peace group also helped to protect the company's monopoly, seizing smuggled sugar, particularly from Sudan, and received commissions from every shipment seized. Clashes between herders and fishermen in northern Cameroon left thousands trying to find shelter in Chad, as reported by the UN. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency said on Thursday, some 11,000 people fled to Chad and a further 7,300 were displaced in Cameroon's far north after fighting broke out in August 10th between herders, fishermen and farmers from different ethnic groups. The violent events have led to about 32 casualties this month, with 19 villages torched. The officials described the fighting as Cameroon's worst ethnic violence in years. 85% of these Cameroonians arriving in Chad are women and children, and also among the men, the majority are elderly, according to data compiled by the Chadian government. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Afghanistan, the Transition Council and leaders of the Taliban gathered on Wednesday night to discuss a security plan in the country as the arrangement of the government structure is underway. The meeting took place in the residence of Abdullah Abdullah, the president of the Council for National Reconciliation, who called for a unified and independent Afghanistan based on justice and equality. The Taliban delegation was led by Khalil al-Rahman Akwani, who asked for the cooperation of political leaders and elders of the country to guarantee the population's safety. Ex-President Hamid Karzai and several other distinguished people attended the encounter. In other notes, the self-proclaimed Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan announced that the Supreme Taliban leader Sheikh Hibatullah Akhundasa ordered the excarceration of all of the country's political prisoners. And we continue in Afghanistan, where our collaborator Bark Jones brings us an update about the situation in the nation.
The situation in Afghanistan is developing rapidly. Ashraf Ghani, the president of Afghanistan in exile, announced from the United Arab Emirates that he had to leave office after threats to be beheaded if he continued to stay in the presidential palace, further angering citizens who oppose the Taliban and their seizure of power. Observers believe the Taliban will have difficulty convincing Afghans they can handle the situation, especially the International Monetary Fund's decision to stop Taliban access to the new Afghan cash reserves, worth about $500,000. On the ground, rituals to commemorate Ashura took place peacefully in Afghanistan, especially in the capital Kabul, where the Shiite Muslims made it clear the Taliban did not prevent them in any way from holding these ceremonies in their Shiite way, considered a radical change in this particular context from the previous attitude of the Taliban as Sunni fundamentalists. It is known from Taliban commanders that they receive orders from the leadership to preserve the security of all citizens on this day, without allowing any action to take place that would limit or stop such ceremonies. On the other hand, the evacuation of foreigners and those wishing to leave Afghanistan continues through Kabul's airport, and Afghan crossings opened, with Pakistan either in the east through the Torkham crossing or in the south through the Spin Buldak crossing. Therefore, fearful citizens wishing to leave Afghanistan and those believing that their stay in a country ruled by the Taliban is no longer possible began to decrease. Informed sources explain that basic sectors of the country such as health and education are partially returning to normal as rapid participation by all citizens is required. But at the same time, Taliban are not likely to let these sectors be as they were before, and the time to do so will surely be at the expense of the Afghan citizens who suffer from the US occupation and now face the consequences of the departure and the return of the Taliban to Afghan reality. From Al-Jadeen for TeleSUR, Bark Jones, Islamabad, Pakistan.
China on Thursday called on the Afghan Taliban to establish a lasting peace in the country and asked critics of the Taliban to adopt dialectical thinking that takes the present situation into consideration.
We encourage and hope that the Afghan Taliban will follow through on their positive statements, unite with all parties and ethnic groups in Afghanistan, and soon establish a broad and inclusive political structure that is in line with Afghanistan's own national conditions and is supported by the people through dialogue and consultation. We also hope that it will carry out mild and solid policies to curb all kinds of terrorism and criminal attacks and ensure a smooth transition in Afghanistan, so as to keep the Afghan people who have suffered in the war a lot away from conflicts as soon as possible and establish a lasting peace. We have also noticed that some people are repeatedly emphasizing that they do not trust the Afghan Taliban. What I want to say is, nothing in the world always stays the same. We advocate comprehensive, connected and developed dialectical thinking to understand, treat and deal with problems. We should not only look at the past, but also at the present situation.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Libyan counterpart held a news conference after bilateral talks in Moscow on Thursday. The top diplomats exchanged views on a broad range of bilateral and international issues, including the situation in the Middle East and North Africa, with special emphasis on the Libyan crisis. The ministers discussed the current situation in Libya, including ways to achieve its comprehensive normalization in light of the collective effort made to move forward the inter-Libyan negotiating process. The Russian Foreign Ministry said in a statement that the Libyan Prime Minister's visit to Moscow was an important step in ramping up a constructive cooperation between both nations. In Lebanon, the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, said an oil tanker would sail from Iran within hours with very much needed fuel supplies, a move that will be in defiance with the United States' illegal sanctions.
I announced to you today, on the day of Muharram, that the first vessel from Iran carrying supplies that need to be brought in has made all arrangements. It has been loaded with tons of the required material and all its administrative work has been complete. It will sail within hours.
The leader of Hezbollah also commented about the situation in Afghanistan and also its consequences in the region.
Following the defeat of U.S. forces in Afghanistan and after 20 years of occupying this country, with all the strategic and historical significance of this incident and its important repercussions on our region and the world, all eyes in the next few months will be trained on the U.S. occupation in Iraq and Syria.
Muslims in Iran held rituals on Thursday to commemorate Ashura and mourn the martyrdom anniversary of Imam Hussein and his faithful companions. Ashura is the culmination of a 10-day annual mourning period in the lunar calendar month of Muharram for Imam Hussein, who was martyred along with his 72 companions in the Battle of Karbala in southern Iraq in 680 AD, after fighting courageously for justice against the much larger army of Yazid I. The Muharram ceremonies symbolize the eternal and unwavering stance of truth against falsehood and humanity's struggle against injustice, tyranny, and oppression. In Iran, however, ceremonies are different this year as gatherings in closed areas and street marches are banned due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.